My stepmom manipulated Dad's well after his death. I found her secret letters. The truth shocked everyone. I never thought my father's legacy would become a battlefield. When my stepmom, Marissa, casually announced the changes to his will during a family dinner, my heart sank. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me, and I was left scrambling to find my footing. Marissa had always been charming, the kind of woman who could light up a room with her laughter. But that night, as she explained her vision for the business, her words felt laced with something darker. My father had built our family business from the ground up, and to hear her claim a bigger share made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the shock of her announcement that rattled me. It was the way she said it, as if it were a mere formality. I glanced around the table, looking for support, but everyone seemed entranced by her charisma. I felt isolated, like a ghost haunting a party I was no longer invited to. Later that night, I found myself alone in my childhood room, staring at the framed photos of my dad. He had always been my rock, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My instincts screamed at me to dig deeper, to question the authenticity of the new will. The next day, I decided to confront Marissa. I had no idea how to approach it, but I needed answers. I walked into her office, the walls adorned with photos of her and my father, and felt a mix of anger and confusion swirling inside me. "Can we talk about the will?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Marissa looked up, her smile faltering for just a moment. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" Her tone was sugary, but I could see a flicker of something else in her eyes. Defensiveness? Guilt? I pressed on, my heart racing. "It just feels sudden, doesn't it? You're running the business alone." She waved her hand dismissively, brushing off my concerns. "Your father wanted what was best for the company, and this is the best way forward. Trust me, it's all for the good of the family." But her words did little to reassure me. They only deepened my suspicion. As I left her office, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I needed proof, something concrete to validate my growing doubts. That evening, I started digging through my father's old files in the attic, searching for any mention of the will or anything that might hint at his true intentions. I sifted through dusty folders, each one bringing back memories of long-forgotten family meetings and plans. Then, I stumbled upon a sealed envelope tucked away in a box labeled Important Documents. My heart raced as I carefully opened it, revealing a handwritten letter from my father addressed to me. The letter was a mixture of love and advice, but what caught my attention was a line that read, "Always protect what we build together." My heart pounded as I considered the implications. Did he foresee something like this? Was there another will that I didn't know about? My mind raced with questions. If Marissa was manipulating the will, how far had she gone? I needed to find out more. The thought of her taking advantage of my father's memory ignited a fire within me, one that I couldn't ignore. I decided to reach out to my brother, Jake, who had been distant since our father's passing. We had always been close, but Marissa had driven a wedge between us. I texted him, asking if we could meet to discuss the business. His response was immediate, almost too eager. "Sure, I'll be there." As I prepared for our meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. I needed to approach this carefully to gauge where Jake stood. Would he side with Marissa, or could I count on him to help me unravel this mess? When Jake arrived, I noticed the weariness in his eyes, a reflection of our shared grief. But there was also something else, an unspoken tension. I broached the subject cautiously, explaining my concerns about the will. To my surprise, he listened intently, his brow furrowing as I spoke. "You think Marissa is lying?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, feeling the weight of my words. "I found a letter from Dad that suggests he wanted us to be involved, not just her. We need to figure out what's really going on." Jake leaned back, contemplating my words. "If you're right, we might be able to challenge it. But we'll need proof, something solid to back us up." I felt a flicker of hope, but the fear of what Marissa might do next loomed over us like a dark cloud. As we parted ways, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air was thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. I had opened Pandora's box, and now I needed to prepare for whatever chaos would follow. The moment I stepped into the office the next morning, the weight of yesterday's revelations hung heavily in the air. My stepmom, Marlene, was already there, seated at Dad's old oak desk, her fingers dancing nervously over the keyboard. I forced a smile, but inside my heart raced. What was she planning now? The unease that had settled in my stomach felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. As I sorted through the day's tasks, I couldn't shake the image of that will from my mind. It felt wrong, almost like a poorly scripted play where the lines were delivered with too much emphasis. My instincts screamed that something was off, but I had no tangible proof yet. Every time I glanced at Marlene, I felt the invisible thread of our relationship fraying, and I knew I had to tread carefully. Marlene seemed unusually chipper, almost too cheerful for someone who had just delivered a bombshell about my father's estate. She kept chatting about the upcoming family dinner, her words a veneer of normalcy over the chaos swirling beneath. I watched her, searching for any sign of guilt or anxiety, but she maintained her facade expertly. The dissonance between her demeanor and the reality of the situation made my skin crawl. After a few hours of pretending to be absorbed in work, I decided to sneak into the filing room. I needed to see if I could find anything related to the will that might offer some clarity. As I rifled through stacks of documents, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Legal Correspondence. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing letters from a law firm I'd never heard of before. The first letter was dated just weeks before Dad's passing, and my gut twisted with suspicion. The letters detailed conversations between Marlene and a lawyer named Thomas Reed, who, as it turned out, specialized in estate planning. My breath caught as I read the words, feeling the tension in my chest tighten. There were references to revisions and final wishes, but nothing about the will itself. I quickly jotted down the lawyer's name, the seed of determination sprouting in my mind. I needed to dig deeper. As I exited the filing room, I spotted Marlene through the glass partition, still engrossed in her work. A surge of anger coursed through me. How could she act so normal after what she had done? The thought of confronting her again made my heart race, but I knew I had to gather more evidence before making any accusations. I had to play this right. One misstep could cost me everything. I decided to reach out to my cousin, Jenna, who had always been close to my father. She had a keen sense of family dynamics and might provide some insight. I texted her, asking if she could meet me for coffee later that day. As I waited for her reply, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a web of deceit. What if Marlene had manipulated everyone around her, not just me? When Jenna arrived, I could see the concern etched on her face. We settled into a cozy corner of the cafe, and I wasted no time. "Jenna, have you heard anything about the will?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression shifted, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Not really. I thought everything was fine." "Why? What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. But the urgency of the situation pushed me to share what I had found. I recounted the conversation with Marlene, the unexpected changes in the will, and the letters I had discovered. Jenna listened intently, her brow furrowing deeper with each detail. "That doesn't sound right, Eliza. I'll talk to my mom and see if she knows anything. But be careful. Marlene has a way of twisting things to her advantage," she warned. After our meeting, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. At least I had someone on my side, but I knew I couldn't rely solely on Jenna. I had to investigate further, to peel back the layers of Marlene's carefully constructed facade. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. What if I could find the original will? What if there were more letters? My resolve hardened. I wouldn't let Marlene's betrayal go unchallenged. That evening, I returned to the office under the guise of finishing up some work. The building was quiet, the only sound being the hum of the fluorescent lights. I slipped back into the filing room, determined to dig deeper. My heart pounded as I sifted through more documents, searching for anything that could give me leverage. Each page turned felt like a step closer to the truth, but I still felt the weight of uncertainty. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a small box tucked away in the corner of a shelf. It looked out of place, and my curiosity piqued. I pulled it down, dusting off the top. Inside, I found a collection of old family photos, but beneath them lay a stack of documents. My hands trembled as I pulled them out, my heart racing as I recognized the familiar handwriting, my father's. As I scanned the pages, I realized they were drafts of his will, written long before Marlene had entered the picture. The terms were vastly different from what she had presented. My mind reeled with the implications. How could she have hidden this? The truth was right in front of me, but I knew I needed more than just words on paper. I had to connect the dots to prove her manipulation beyond doubt. With the documents in hand, I left the office feeling a surge of hope mixed with fear. I had uncovered something monumental, but I was still walking a tightrope. I needed to tread carefully. One wrong move could alert Marlene to my investigation. As I drove home, I made a mental checklist of what to do next. I had to find that lawyer, Thomas Reed, and get to the bottom of this. But as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a figure standing by the front porch. It was Marlene, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The sight sent a chill down my spine. Had she sensed my growing suspicion? The tension crackled in the air between us, and I realized that whatever was coming next, I had to be ready. Marlene stood there, her posture rigid, a stark contrast to the warm glow of the porch light. I could feel my heart pounding as I parked the car, the weight of our last conversation hanging heavily between us. This was the first time I had seen her since I began to dig deeper into the will, and the unease in her eyes hinted that she knew I was onto something. I stepped out of the car, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Hey, Marlene, everything okay?" I tried to keep my voice light, but it trembled slightly. She didn't respond immediately, her gaze flicking to the ground, as if searching for the right words or perhaps a way to deflect the conversation. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice low and cautious. "I just wanted to talk about the business, about what's happening with the will." The casual tone felt like a mask, and I could see the tension in her clenched fists. It was as if she was trying to control the narrative, but I wasn't going to let her steer this conversation away from the truth. I gestured for her to sit on the porch steps, hoping for a moment of honesty. "I've been thinking about Dad's will, Marlene. It just doesn't sit right with me." I watched her face closely, looking for any flicker of guilt or defensiveness. Instead, she maintained a calm exterior, but I could see her jaw tightening. "You know how complicated these things can be," she replied, her tone defensive. "Dad wanted to ensure the business continued smoothly. I'm just trying to honor his wishes." I felt a surge of frustration. Her words felt rehearsed, like she had been preparing for this moment. I needed to dig deeper, to uncover what lay beneath her surface. That night, I lay awake, replaying our conversation in my mind. Marlene's words echoed, but it was the way she avoided eye contact that haunted me. I had to find something concrete, something that would expose her manipulation. I grabbed my laptop and began searching for the lawyer mentioned in the will, hoping to uncover a link between him and Marlene. As I sifted through old emails and legal documents, I stumbled upon a thread that sent a jolt through me. It was an exchange between Marlene and the lawyer, dated just weeks before Dad's passing. They discussed not just the will, but also financial matters that didn't seem relevant to the estate. My heart raced as I realized I was onto something significant. The next day, I decided to confront my brother, Evan, who had always been close to Marlene. Maybe he had insights that I didn't. I invited him over under the guise of a casual family dinner, but my mind was racing with questions. As we sat at the table, I casually brought up the topic of the will, watching for his reaction. "You know, I've been thinking about how Dad wanted things to be after he was gone." I started trying to gauge his thoughts. Evan nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Yeah, it's a lot to process, but I trust Marlene to handle it." His immediate defense of her made my stomach churn. It felt like he was oblivious to the cracks in her story. But what if it's not what Dad really wanted? I pressed, watching him closely. What if Marlene has her own agenda? Evan's expression shifted, confusion etched on his face. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, and I knew I had to plant the seed of doubt carefully. After dinner, I offered to show him the emails I'd found. His eyes widened as I scrolled through the correspondence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. This doesn't look good," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a surge of hope. If I could get Evan on my side, we could confront Marlene together. As the days passed, I continued to gather evidence. I contacted a few family friends who had been close to my dad, hoping they could shed light on his true intentions. Each conversation revealed small inconsistencies in Marlene's narrative, and with every piece of information, my resolve grew stronger. I found out that Marlene had been making significant changes to the business without consulting anyone, claiming it was all part of Dad's vision. Yet, those who knew him well insisted he would have never approved such drastic measures. It was as if she was rewriting history to fit her needs, and I was determined to stop her. With Evan's support, we began to piece together a timeline of events, marking the moments when Marlene had acted unilaterally. The more we uncovered, the more we realized how calculated her moves had been. It was time to confront her with our findings, but I knew I had to choose the right moment, one that would leave no room for her to manipulate the situation further. I decided to invite the family for a weekend gathering, framing it as a casual get-together. My plan was to create a relaxed atmosphere before unveiling the evidence, hoping it would minimize her ability to control the narrative. As the day approached, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I was stepping into a storm, but I was no longer afraid. The day of the family gathering arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I had set the dining room table with our father's favorite china, the one he used for special occasions, as if that would somehow invoke his spirit to guide me. My stepmom, Carol, floated around the kitchen, pretending to be helpful while keeping an eye on everything I did. It was unsettling how normal she seemed, like a wolf in sheep's clothing, all while I was about to expose her. As the family trickled in, I greeted them with a smile, masking the turmoil inside. My brother, Mark, arrived first, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to my internal chaos. He hugged me tightly, whispering, "You okay?" I nodded, but my heart raced. I could feel the weight of the letters hidden in my bag, a tangible reminder of the storm I was about to unleash. Once everyone was seated, I tried to keep the atmosphere light, sharing stories from our childhood and laughing at old family jokes. But as I glanced at Carol, I noticed her tension beneath the surface. She kept adjusting her hair and glancing at her phone, clearly agitated. It was as if she could sense the shift in the air, the impending confrontation looming just beneath the surface. After dinner, I suggested we move to the living room for dessert. I had planned this moment carefully, and now it was time to execute it. I pulled out the letters, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. The room quieted as I laid the papers on a coffee table, my hands shaking slightly. "I found something I think we need to talk about," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Carol's eyes widened, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. "What are those?" she asked, feigning innocence. The family looked between us, confusion and curiosity etched on their faces. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, and explained how I had discovered the letters exchanged between Carol and the lawyer, detailing their conversations about the will. Each word felt like a dagger aimed at the heart of the family. As I spoke, I watched Carol's expression shift from feigned ignorance to something darker. She leaned forward, her voice low and icy. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her eyes narrowing. The room tensed, and I could feel my family's eyes on us, their confusion morphing into concern. I pressed on, determined to unveil the truth, regardless of the risk. Then, unexpectedly, Aunt Linda, who had been quietly observing, chimed in. "I remember those letters," she said, her voice steady. "I saw them a few weeks ago when I was helping Carol with some paperwork." The room erupted in murmurs, and I felt a surge of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. I had allies, and they were starting to see through Carol's facade. Carol's face paled, and she quickly tried to regain control. "Those letters are irrelevant. They were just discussions about managing the business," she shot back, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I could see the cracks in her armor forming, and I pressed further. "But they discussed changes to the will that no one else knew about. Why would you keep that from us, Carol?" The tension in the room thickened, and I could feel the weight of every eye on Carol. My heart raced as I realized that I was standing on the precipice of something monumental. This was more than just a family dispute. It was a revelation that could change everything. I took a step closer to her, my voice steady. "You manipulated us, and it's time we addressed that." In that moment, I noticed my brother's expression shift from confusion to understanding. He looked at me, then back at Carol, as if piecing together a puzzle. "You hid the previous will, didn't you?" Mark asked, his voice low but firm. Carol opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. It was as if she had been struck dumb by the truth, and the room fell silent, hanging on her next move. Carol finally straightened her back, tried to regain her composure. "You think you can just waltz in here and accuse me? I've worked hard to keep this family business running," she retorted, her voice shaky but defensive. "You don't understand the pressures I've been under." I could see her scrambling for excuses, but they felt weak, hollow in the face of the evidence laid before us. I took a moment to let her words hang in the air, then replied, "This isn't about the business, Carol. This is about trust and loyalty. You betrayed our family." My voice echoed in the room, and I could feel the tension rising. I had crossed a line, but I wasn't backing down. I had to keep pushing to make them see the truth. Just then, Uncle Tom, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "If you've been hiding things from us, Carol, that's a serious issue. We deserve to know the truth." His support felt like a lifeline, and I could see Carol's confidence waver. The tide was turning, and I needed to seize the moment. We all deserve transparency, especially when it comes to our father's legacy. The conversation spiraled into chaos as family members began voicing their doubts about Carol's actions. I could feel the pressure building, the realization that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. I watched as Carol's carefully constructed facade crumbled, her eyes darting around the room, searching for support that wasn't there. She was losing her grip, and I had to push harder. With the stakes rising, I knew I had to prepare for the fallout. The gathering had become a battleground, and I needed to gather my allies for the legal fight ahead. I felt a surge of determination. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance, but for the integrity of our family legacy. I had to be strategic now, to ensure that this confrontation didn't end in chaos, but rather set the stage for a more significant reckoning. The family meeting had barely concluded, but the tension lingered like a thick fog. I could see the doubt in my siblings' eyes, the way they exchanged glances filled with uncertainty. It was clear that my stepmom's manipulation had planted seeds of division, and I needed to act before those seeds took root. I felt a sense of urgency. The truth had to come out, and I was determined to be the one to expose it. As I sat in my car after the meeting, I replayed the conversation in my mind. My stepmom had been so quick to dismiss my claims, her voice laced with false confidence. I had seen the way her hands trembled slightly when I mentioned the letters. It was a crack in her facade, and I needed to exploit it. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that she was hiding something more significant than just a will. I decided to reach out to my cousin, Jenna, who had always been close to our father. If anyone could help me uncover the truth, it was her. I texted her, my fingers shaking slightly as I typed. "Can we talk? I need your help with something important." I waited anxiously for her reply, feeling a mix of hope and fear. Would she stand by me, or would she side with my stepmom? When Jenna agreed to meet, I felt a surge of relief. We chose a small cafe away from the family drama, where the atmosphere was calm and the coffee strong. As we settled into a corner booth, I laid out everything: the will, the letters, the strange lawyer. Her eyes widened as I spoke, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She had always been the logical one, and I hoped she could help me make sense of this mess. "You really think she's trying to manipulate the will?" Jenna asked, her brow furrowing in concern. I nodded, feeling the weight of my conviction settle in my chest. I found correspondence between her and that lawyer. It feels off. It's like they were plotting something behind closed doors. Jenna leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We need to dig deeper. If there's more to this, we have to find it before it's too late." We spent the next few hours brainstorming, dissecting every detail I had uncovered. Jenna suggested I confront the lawyer directly, but I hesitated. What if he was in on it? What if he was as manipulative as my stepmom? I needed to tread carefully, but I also knew that time was running out. I had to gather more evidence, something concrete that would support my claims. As we left the cafe, Jenna squeezed my arm reassuringly. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." Her support gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I started to map out my next steps, envisioning how I could approach the lawyer without raising suspicion. I would need to be smart about this, and I couldn't let my stepmom know I was onto her. The following day, I made an appointment to meet with the lawyer under the pretense of discussing the will. My heart raced as I walked into his office, the walls lined with legal books and framed diplomas. He greeted me with a practiced smile, and I forced myself to smile back, hiding the turmoil inside. I needed to act casual, as if I was there for a simple consultation, but every instinct screamed that I was stepping into a trap. As we settled into his office, I tried to gauge his demeanor. He was charming, but there was something unsettling about his eyes. I casually brought up the will, watching for any flicker of reaction. His smile faltered for just a moment, and I noted it, my mind racing with possibilities. Was he aware of my suspicions? Did he realize I was onto the truth? I've been thinking a lot about my father's wishes, I said, keeping my tone light. It just feels like there's more to this will than meets the eye. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting to one of feigned concern. It's important to respect the wishes of the deceased, but sometimes families can complicate matters. Have you discussed this with your stepmother? His question felt like a trap, but I played along. I have, but I feel like she's hiding something. I just want to ensure everything is above board. I watched as he shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing slightly. It was a small change, but I caught it, and it fueled my determination. There was definitely more to uncover, and I was one step closer to revealing it. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a mixture of dread and exhilaration. I had gathered a small glimpse of the truth, but it was clear that I needed to dig deeper. I could sense that the walls were closing in, and I had to be careful not to tip my hand. The stakes were higher than ever, and I couldn't afford to make a mistake now. I had allies, but I also had an enemy who was cunning and manipulative. Back at home, I sat down with Jenna to share what I had learned. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as I recounted the meeting. "He's definitely hiding something," she said, her tone serious. "We need to find a way to expose him. If we can get our hands on any documents or evidence, it could turn the tide in our favor." I nodded, feeling the urgency of our situation. We spent the next few days gathering information, combing through old family records and correspondence. Each piece of evidence felt like a breadcrumb leading us closer to the truth. I could sense the tension building, not just between my stepmom and me, but throughout the family. Whispers of doubt and confusion were starting to circulate, and I knew I had to act before the situation escalated further. With every passing day, the stakes grew higher. I was acutely aware that my stepmom was watching me closely, her eyes filled with suspicion. I had to be careful, always calculating my next move. I felt like a chess player, maneuvering my pieces while trying to anticipate my opponent's strategy. The game was on, and I was determined to win. The tension in the air was palpable as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the piles of documents I had printed out over the past few days. Each page was a piece of the puzzle, fragments of a larger picture that painted my stepmom in a light I never wanted to see. I had a plan, but I needed to be careful about how I executed it. Every move had to be calculated, every word carefully chosen. I was preparing for the storm that was about to break. I decided to reach out to my dad's old accountant, someone who had been with the family for years and knew the ins and outs of our finances. When I called him, his voice was warm and familiar, but there was an edge of concern as I explained my situation. He hesitated before saying he would meet me, and I sensed that he knew more than he was letting on. I arranged to meet him at a cafe, away from prying eyes, hoping he could provide the insight I desperately needed. As I sat across from him, I could see the worry etched on his face. "Your father was meticulous about his will, and there were always backups in case of emergencies," he said, glancing around as if the walls had ears. I felt a flicker of hope at his words. Maybe there was a previous will, one that favored me, just as I had suspected. But then he leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "I don't want to get involved, but I've heard whispers about your stepmom's dealings. She's been very secretive lately." That revelation sent a chill down my spine. I needed to dig deeper to find out what exactly my stepmom had been hiding. I spent the next few days sifting through family documents and old emails, trying to connect the dots. Late one night, as I scrolled through my father's old correspondence, I stumbled upon a thread that made my heart race. It was an email chain between my dad and the lawyer who had drawn up the will, discussing amendments and future plans. I saved the email, knowing it could be crucial, but I still needed more evidence. I decided to test the waters with my stepmom to see how she would react to certain topics. I casually brought up family finances during dinner, watching her closely. Her demeanor shifted instantly. She became defensive, almost agitated. "Why are you so interested in this?" she snapped, her fork clattering onto her plate. I feigned innocence, but inside I was exhilarated. I had struck a nerve, and it was clear that she had something to hide. The next day, I met with my dad's accountant again, this time bringing along the email I had found. His eyes widened as he read it, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "This is important," he said, tapping the screen. "If your father had intentions to change the will, this could invalidate the current one. You need to find that original document." The urgency in his voice propelled me forward. I had to find that will, and I had to find it fast. I decided to visit the family's safe deposit box at the bank, where I knew my father had stored important documents. I had a key, but I also had to be cautious about when I went. I picked a time when I knew my stepmom would be busy at the office. As I stood in the bank, my heart raced, half excited and half terrified. I opened the box, and there it was, the original will, yellowed with age, but unmistakably my father's handwriting. My breath caught in my throat as I realized how significant this was. As I read through the will, my heart soared. It clearly stated that I was the primary beneficiary, a fact that could shatter my stepmom's plans. I quickly made copies, knowing I would need to present this evidence soon. But I also felt a weight of responsibility. This wasn't just about money. It was about my father's legacy, about honoring his memory. I had to approach this delicately, especially when it came time to confront my stepmom with the truth. But before I could think through my next steps, I received an unexpected call from my aunt, who had been suspicious of my stepmom's behavior as well. "I've heard things, and I want to help you," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. I hadn't expected her support, and it was a relief to know I wasn't alone in this fight. We agreed to meet and discuss a plan of action. The more allies I had, the stronger my case would be. That evening, I gathered my thoughts and reviewed everything I had. The evidence was piling up, and the tension was mounting. I felt like I was on the brink of something monumental, but I had to keep my cool. My stepmom was cunning, and I couldn't afford to underestimate her. I needed to be strategic in how I revealed the truth, ensuring that it would land the hardest blow possible. The next family gathering was approaching, and I knew it would be my moment to shine. I envisioned standing in front of everyone, holding the documents that would expose my stepmom's deceit. I rehearsed what I would say, each word carefully chosen to deliver the maximum impact. I could already picture the shock on my family's faces, the disbelief that my stepmom had manipulated them all. It was time to turn the tables and take back what was rightfully mine. In the days leading up to the gathering, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that my stepmom was plotting something of her own. Every time I caught her eye, I could see the wheels turning in her mind. I needed to stay one step ahead, but how? I decided to enlist my aunt's help in preparing for potential counterarguments. If my stepmom tried to twist the narrative, we would be ready. As I walked into the family gathering, the atmosphere was charged. I could sense the tension, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. My stepmom greeted me with a tight smile, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was armed with the truth. This was it. I was ready to reveal everything. I just had to hold on for a little longer before the truth would finally come to light. The moment I stepped into the gathering, my heart raced, and the weight of the moment pressed down on me like a heavy cloak. Everyone was seated, their eyes darting between my stepmom and me, as if they could sense the storm brewing. I could feel my resolve solidifying. I had to expose the truth, not just for myself, but for my father's legacy. The room was filled with whispers, but I pushed them aside, focusing on the evidence I had meticulously gathered over the past few weeks. As I took my seat, I noticed my stepmom's hands fidgeting with the tablecloth, her usual confidence wavering. I had called a family meeting, but I could tell she wasn't prepared for the direction it was about to take. My uncle, a staunch supporter of my father's vision, glanced at me with a knowing look, silently encouraging me to go ahead. I could feel the tension, a palpable energy that seemed to electrify the air around us. I cleared my throat, ready to confront the carefully woven web of deceit. Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't easy, but I need to discuss something very important regarding my father's will. My voice trembled slightly, but I steadied myself. I could see my stepmom's face drain of color, and for a brief moment, I relished the sight of her discomfort. This was my moment to reclaim my father's legacy, and I wouldn't back down. I pulled out the letters I had found, the ones that revealed my stepmom's collusion with the lawyer. These letters show that you've been in contact with Mr. Harper, the lawyer who manipulated the will against my father's wishes. It's clear that you've been planning this for a long time, and it's time for the truth to come out. I felt the heat of the room intensify as everyone leaned in, their eyes wide with disbelief. My stepmom's expression shifted from shock to anger. This is absurd. You're twisting everything. Those letters are taken out of context. Her voice was sharp, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. I had expected her to deflect, but I also sensed that she was struggling to maintain her composure. The room was silent, everyone hanging on our exchange, waiting for the next move. I pressed on, determined not to let her intimidate me. You've hidden a will that favored me, one that my father wrote before he passed. You didn't just change the will, you manipulated the entire process to serve your own interests. I felt the weight of the words as they hung in the air, and I could see some family members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't just a fight for inheritance. It was a battle for the truth. My cousin, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I remember my uncle mentioning a previous will. Why didn't you tell us about it? The question hung there, and I could see my stepmom's facade cracking. I had allies in the room, and their support fueled my determination. The tide was turning, and I felt emboldened by their growing skepticism towards her. In that moment, I realized I needed to be strategic. I couldn't let her twist the narrative any further. I took a deep breath, recalling the details of the previous will I had uncovered. My father wanted me to have this business, and he made it clear in his earlier will. You betrayed not just me, but his memory as well. The room murmured, the shift in sentiment palpable as doubt began to creep into their minds. I glanced at my stepmom, her eyes narrowing as she struggled to maintain her composure. You're making a huge mistake, and you'll regret this, she warned, but her voice lacked conviction. I could sense her desperation. The walls were closing in on her. I had to keep pushing, keep the pressure on until the truth fully emerged. The stakes were high, and I was prepared to fight. Suddenly, my uncle stood up, his voice steady. We need to hear the whole story. If there's a will that supports your claims, we owe it to your father to investigate. We can't let this go unresolved. His support felt like a lifeline, bolstering my courage. I could see the tide shifting in my favor, and it fueled my resolve to press forward. I nodded, grateful for his backing. I have a copy of the previous will, and I'm willing to present it to a lawyer for verification. We need to get to the bottom of this, and I won't rest until my father's true wishes are honored. I could feel the energy in the room change. Uncertainty loomed in my stepmom's eyes as she realized she was losing her grip on the narrative. As the murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. The evidence was there, and I had the support I needed. I felt a surge of hope, but I knew this was just the beginning. My stepmom would fight back, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. I could almost hear the ticking clock, counting down to the moment when the truth would finally be revealed. But just as I was about to suggest we gather the necessary documents, my stepmom interjected, her voice rising. You think you can just take everything from me? You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family. Her words dripped with desperation, and I could see the cracks in her armor. It was a powerful reminder that this battle was as much about emotions as it was about legalities. This isn't just about you. It's about honoring my father's legacy. I shot back, my voice firm. I could feel the support of my family around me, a shield against her accusations. The tension was electric, and I knew I had to maintain my composure. I had come too far to back down now, and I wouldn't let her manipulation go unchallenged. The room was charged with anticipation as everyone awaited my next move. I needed to set the stage for the final confrontation, where the truth would be laid bare. I could almost taste the victory, but I had to tread carefully. I glanced around the room, gauging the reactions of my family members, hoping they would see the truth in my words. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my father's legacy resting on my shoulders. This wasn't just a fight for inheritance. It was a fight for justice, for what was right. I knew that I had to prepare for the battle ahead, to gather every ounce of strength and determination I had. The moment of reckoning was near, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The courtroom was buzzing with a tension that felt almost electric. I stood at the front, heart racing, as I prepared to face my stepmom for the last time in this legal battle. The judge was about to enter, and I could see the mixture of anxiety and anticipation on the faces of my family members gathered in the audience. This was it. The moment I had fought so hard for was finally here. As the judge took her seat, I felt a surge of adrenaline. My lawyer, Sarah, whispered a few last-minute reminders about the key points we had rehearsed. I glanced over at my stepmom, who sat across the room, her expression a mask of feigned confidence. I knew better. The cracks in her facade were evident to anyone who had been paying attention. The proceedings began, and I listened intently as Sarah laid out her case. She presented the letters I had discovered, detailing the correspondence between my stepmom and that shady lawyer. Each word felt like a nail driving deeper into the coffin of her credibility. My heart swelled with hope as I watched the judge's brow furrow, clearly intrigued by the evidence we had presented. Then it was my turn to speak. I stepped forward, my voice trembling slightly, but gaining strength with each word. I recounted the history of our family business, the dreams my father had for it, and how I had always believed I would carry that legacy forward. I spoke of the will, the hidden letters, and the betrayal that had unfolded right under my nose. I could see the reactions from the audience. Some were nodding, others looked shocked. When my stepmom was called to the stand, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. She was a master manipulator, and I knew she would try to twist the narrative in her favor. Her testimony was laced with emotional appeals, painting herself as the grieving widow trying to honor my father's wishes. I could feel the air shift as some family members seemed to waver, caught in her web of deceit. But I was ready for her. As she spoke, I remembered the moments of doubt I had experienced, the time she had slipped up in her stories. I watched closely as she claimed my father had wanted her to have full control of the business, but I knew that was a lie. I had found evidence of the previous will, the one that favored me, and I was determined to make it known. When it was time for cross-examination, I took a deep breath and stood before her. You said my father wanted you to have everything, but isn't it true that you hid the original will? I could see her composure falter, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. The truth was unraveling, and I felt a rush of triumph. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, and I could see the judge's interest peaking. I pressed on, revealing the timeline of events and the inconsistencies in her story. With each question, I felt the weight of my father's legacy pressing down on my shoulders, and I knew I was fighting not just for myself, but for him as well. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge called for a recess. As we stepped out of the courtroom, I caught sight of my stepmom, her face pale and defeated. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The truth was coming to light, and I was no longer the victim of her manipulation. After a brief intermission, we returned, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The judge delivered her ruling, her voice steady and authoritative. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the will your father intended to be executed was indeed the one that favored his daughter, not the one that was manipulated by the stepmother. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. I felt my heart soar as the words sank in. It was over. The fight was won, and I was finally free from the shackles of my stepmom's deceit. I glanced at her, and for the first time, I saw her vulnerability laid bare. She had lost, and I had reclaimed my rightful place in our family business. As the court adjourned, my family members rushed to embrace me, their support overwhelming. The relief washed over me like a wave, and I felt the burden I had carried for so long lift from my shoulders. We gathered in the hallway, exchanging tears of joy and disbelief. I knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but for now, I could breathe. My stepmom stood a few feet away, her expression a mixture of anger and resignation. I felt a pang of sadness for what could have been, but I knew I had to protect myself and my future. The business my father built was my legacy, and I was ready to honor it in the way he would have wanted. As we left the courthouse, I felt a sense of clarity. The fight had changed me. I was no longer just the daughter trying to live up to her father's expectations. I was a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, ready to take the reins of our family business and lead it into a new era. I glanced back one last time, my stepmom now just a shadow of my past. I would never forget the lessons learned during this tumultuous journey. My father's spirit would guide me, and I was determined to make him proud. As I drove home, I thought about the future. I would rebuild not just the business, but the family bonds that had frayed during this ordeal. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it all head-on, armed with the truth and a newfound sense of purpose. Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed our videos, please like, share, and subscribe to the llama if you want more drama. It truly means a lot.